This is Adolf Hitler's My New Order, the sequel to Mein Kampf. In it, you'll find a collection of Hitler's most famous speeches. And if you're wondering where to find it, don't bother with a local bookstore. You can start with the president's bedside table. According to a 1990 interview in Vanity Fair, that's where Ivana Trump frequently saw her then-husband, now president, put this little number down after reading it, quote, from time to time. And we have reason to believe this is true, since a friend confirmed giving the book to Trump, something he only admitted to after an oh-so-convincingly innocent "Why? Who's asking?" Okay, yep, think we're done here. Let's wrap it up. Give him the mustache thing. That's enough activism for today. Okay, but actually there is something we need to talk about first. No one thinks that Trump just reading this book or other normal things like getting Heil Hitlered by his friends is actually incriminating. So why then is the White House swimming in Nazi propaganda?
The administration has rolled out a campaign across departments that draws on images and ideas borrowed from right-wing and white nationalist circles.
One homeland, one people, one heritage. Remember who you are, American.
I am the storm. We are the storm. The light will defeat the dark. We will prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil. They cannot imagine what they have awakened. They cannot conceive of the army that they have arisen in all of us.
Okay, friends, quick sponsor drama for you. I want to make sure I respect your time, so if you're not interested in the juicy details or supporting the channel, feel free to skip ahead to this timestamp. Those of you who have stuck around, thank you. As you probably know, for the past about 2 years now, we've been working with Aura. I have praised them for being a good service and for having the guts to sponsor a channel like ours, which most other sponsors won't touch. Last week, every creator working with Aura got a corporate email out of the blue that basically said, hey, instead of this fair deal that we've had for the past multiple years, we're changing it so that we make all the money and you get nothing. XOXO corporate. I have tried everything in my power to negotiate and get them to be reasonable because the new terms are genuinely offensive, but they won't budge and have basically given all of us the finger. So, long story short, it sure would be a shame if everyone who signed up for Aura for my sake were to cancel their subscriptions and tell all their friends not to use Aura. But personal pettiness aside, this really leaves the channel in the lurch. I swear this past year has been just one financial kick in the teeth after another. We had come to count on that predictable monthly revenue since up till now Aura had been so consistent. So I guess the lesson I keep failing to learn is that socialist creators should never trust anyone who is not ideologically aligned with their mission. Brands and liberal platforms will disappoint you every single time. So, all this to say, we are doubling down on Means TV and Patreon. I've already started putting up some additional exclusive content on Means. Right now we've got Second Thought After Dark companion episodes for each of the last few uploads. They're a lot of fun. I've also got a 15-minute rant about the Iran situation. I mentioned before that our production cycle is so slow here on YouTube that I wanted to get some kind of statement out on Iran before too long, but we are working on an Iran episode for YouTube. It'll just take a little bit. And then I'm also strongly considering finally pulling the trigger on making the multi-hour propaganda masterclass I've been thinking about for a couple years. If that sounds interesting to you, let me know in the comments. We've had enough of the corporate nonsense here at Second Thought. I think it's time we actually do the socialist thing and build our own vision of the future. And that means direct support for the channels we care about and coming together to build the best media ecosystem we can. If you're a fan of Second Thought, please do consider signing up for Means TV using any of the links in the description. I've got a 20% off discount for you or 50% off for existing patrons. If you're not interested in Means, consider tossing us a few bucks on Patreon. You get a bunch of cool perks there too. And finally, if you're a socialist content creator, get in touch. Send me an email and let's talk about getting you on Means TV. It's time we took matters into our own hands and supported each other here. So, thank you for taking the time to listen, and thank you especially to everyone who chooses to support what we're doing here at Second Thought. This channel, now especially, would really not exist without your support. All right, back to the show. The White House has a Nazi problem. In the last couple of months, we've seen everything from Big Brother banners to genocidal city pop coming not from 4chan or edgelord Twitter accounts, but official government channels. You might remember Stephen Miller, the Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House, giving a speech at Charlie Kirk's memorial. It turns out that speech strongly resembled one by Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister. Same metaphors, imagery, same victimhood narrative, and same appeals to white supremacy and revenge. The DHS Twitter account has had a similar problem. Recently, they've used lyrics from a white nationalist song as promotional material, as well as a neo-Nazi slogan, and so has the DOL's Twitter. More than once, more than twice, and then once more back on the DHS account. For months now, we've seen post after post using white supremacist, far-right, and at times even outright Nazi rhetoric. The White House has called immigration an invasion, called the opposition wicked and evil, made Trump and ICE out to be irreproachable, called themselves the heirs to the Roman Empire, and implored their supporters to defend a declining, i.e. less white, nation. This is all very Nazi stuff, of course, and it shouldn't surprise us too much from a government that's had 1, 2, 3, 4, and who could forget 5, oops, there's a Nazi in our ranks moments. And now that these same government channels have also become vehicles for outright denial of reality, it seems like all this isn't really a Nazi problem for the White House. It's a Nazi project. You probably remember that after the murders in broad daylight of Renee Good, Keith Porter, and Alex Preddy by ICE, for example, the White House has, in direct contradiction with video evidence, lied about the citizens they killed. Even though the blame is clearly on ICE, the admins called journalists questioning the dozens of deaths at ICE's hands hacks and barraged the press with statements that blame protesters for dying at the hands of the American Gestapo. Why, right? With everything that's happening, people being disappeared, ICE officers killing and arresting people indiscriminately, the fact that people have to scream at the top of their lungs deep into the night so their neighbors don't get rounded up. Why do all this? What is the point of this propaganda when it is all so blatantly cruel? We've known for months that they're not rounding up violent criminals. Why even lie if no one believes this shit? It's because that's all they have. In his book, Disaster Nationalism, Richard Seymour writes that the only thing the far right can actually deliver is adrenaline and revenge. Not happiness, not solutions, just anxiety and the immediate relief of, quote, a shot of confidence and a thrill of collective hate. That's because in every single far-right regime, the arc of history looks the exact same. First, they hijack the rhetoric of other political parties, particularly the left. As the opposition, the far-right promises to solve the problems of the middle and lower classes that are ignored by the establishment. Poverty, low wages, inflation, the far-right promises these things can be solved. But not with radical change, only with radical violence. And it always fails. Under Mussolini, Italian wages fell back 30 years. Incomes fell under Bolsonaro in Brazil, and by the end, only those earning 5 times the average wage still stood by him. Modi and Duterte both worsened inequality and poverty in their respective countries. And neither of Trump's terms have helped average Americans. Neither during the first term, when wages stayed flatter than under any other administration, nor today thanks to the mess of tariff inflation and mass layoffs. When the far right gets into power, their first order of business is cutting workers' rights and union busting and making the bosses happy. And if people starve, they don't care about the breadlines. But people do. We do. When fascists promise to help workers and things don't get better, when reality doesn't match up to the campaign promises, the only thing left for the fascist right is violent escalation. And here a new mechanism starts to kick in. Far-right leaders and their supporters mutually radicalize each other. First, the state starts creating propaganda like the kind we've seen the last few months. Foreigners are dehumanized and cast as threats. Supporters are told that their nation is under threat by these others. And the language of violence against enemies begins to permeate every speech and image published by the regime. Leaders parade around in military and law enforcement outfits, holding guns, talking about centennial revenge, and tangling up humiliation and fear with a myth of violence as heroism. Predictably, inevitably, people start enforcing the fascist program themselves. Hate crimes, homemade fascist memes, mass shootings by lone wolves, and soon enough, without it being official policy yet, police officers start killing. Not because it's the law, but because the tension keeps rising and the enemies have been designated. Here's where things mutually reinforce. Once that happens, the administration now has a new opportunity to get the attention away from their economic failure and show their supporters that they're listening to them. These killings become retribution for the fact that things aren't getting better. They're both a replacement for progress and get spun as proof that the regime can't succeed because of these outsiders. So instead of pumping the brakes, they endorse the violence. They continue to demonize foreigners, and their base gets a pass to radicalize even further. If you look at the kind of stuff they're posting right now, you can see this really clearly. This looks like some shit your cousin would make. The White House isn't indoctrinating its base. They are egging each other on. For the record, this is how anti-Semitism under the Nazis grew to such extremes. Before the party had made anti-Semitism official state policy with the Nuremberg laws, mobs had already heeded the party's language and begun pogroms against Jews. All over Germany, local registrars had already started preventing marriages between, quote, Aryans and non-Aryans. Synagogues, Jewish homes, and shops owned by Jews were being set on fire, and soon the police started arresting so-called race defilers before that had become an official law. Like in every other far-right regime, propaganda wasn't just beamed into the minds of ordinary people, turning them into ethno-nationalists. The state and the population became entangled in their mutually reinforcing desires to ignore everything getting worse around them by finding common pleasure in living out violent fantasies. Things don't improve, but at least someone is doing something. It's why so many Trump supporters today believe he's kept his promises. Groceries aren't less expensive. Electricity costs haven't been slashed in half. America's reputation is in the trash. Of course, going after every brown person in the country wasn't going to help with any of that. But MAGA supporters see the zip ties and the chains and the planes and the dead protesters, and for a moment, that relieves the anxiety that there's nothing to be done about their problems. Except that little moment where the anxiety is gone doesn't last forever. Seymour describes this like killing a spider. For an arachnophobe, no amount of killing spiders ever cures the fear. For an ethno-nationalist, no amount of violence is ever going to be enough. The more people are brutalized by ICE, the more it's apparent that it doesn't solve anything, the more the anxiety builds and the need for violence comes back. Under the Nazis, the same thing was true. As the end of the war was on the horizon, as everyone saw that all hope was lost for Germany, Hitler didn't order his troops to stand down and admit defeat. He commanded them to keep fighting. This recklessness catapulted the army's losses into the hundreds of thousands and gave Hitler a new internal target to replace the dwindling Jewish scapegoat. In the last year of Hitler's rule, the courts sentenced 30,000 and executed 20,000 German soldiers for refusing to fight or, quote, undermining the war effort. Repression increased on the German population to the point that any criticism of the leadership was met with terror. Officials began organizing death marches, first from concentration camps around the country, killing hundreds of thousands of prisoners, most of them Jewish. Then, in the final year, German police, SS, and party members began leading marches from within German cities, repressing further any sign of dissent from the general population. The regime never runs out of enemies because mass violence never gets results. And the kind of things that do get results, they don't want to do. They're not inviting union leaders to the White House. They invite tech CEOs. They're not raising the minimum wage or making healthcare free or stopping price gouging. They're just killing some proles. All they have is the spectacle. So it doesn't matter if it's all lies. It's the only thing on.